Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say it's a real privilege to be able to be here. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. I've got the graveyard shift, so I try not to bore you all to sleep. But you know, a long time ago, when I was a young man, you know, never ever anticipated I'd be standing in front of an audience and sharing my story about how my life had changed. I had everything perfectly planned out, my whole future, my career, and yeah, one single moment just ruined all of that. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was back in 2009. I was on my second tour of Afghanistan and out on foot patrol in the Sangin area, and the multiple of men that I was with had to go on top of this small hill to provide overwatch basically for another multiple guys pushing through in the valley beneath us, clearing compounds and so on. Now the landscape of warfare changed quite a bit. The Taliban became quite known for using improvised explosive devices or IEDs, and they'd make these things at home and they'd go and plant them pretty much everywhere, and you know, men, women, children, people can't really see where they were, so sometimes some innocents would also set these things off. But we had a detecting kit that we could use to find these devices, and when we find one we can mark it so everyone can see where it is in the void, and if there's a bit more time we can get bomb disposal and make it safe. But it's a pretty laborious process. But we got to this hilltop, and my role was to place all the guys out in what we call an all-round defence on the perimeter of this hill, like a defensive circle. That allows us to see 360 degrees of what's going on around us. And in front of me I had the two Valen men, we call them the guys with the detectors, who clear the ground as we go. And once this perimeter was set, they then continued to clear the rest of this hilltop to make it safe. Now the day in itself was absolutely glorious. It's similar to what it is like outside today. You know, the sun was shining, it was really warm, there was a slight breeze that would pick up bits of sand and I could feel it against my skin. There's like a smell, like an earthy smell, and it's probably the best way to describe it. And to the left of us was this green valley that just had crops growing in there and vegetation, this river flowing through the centre, and these beautiful mountains in the distance. Very much a contrast to this barren desert landscape that we had over to the right. Checked with the guys, and then bang! I just got thrown in the air and I hit the ground with a mighty crack, and then the whole world is just instantly blocked out with thick black smoke and red dust. Now, I knew a bomb went off at the time. I didn't quite know who set it off. You know, for a moment there, I couldn't see or hear anybody, so I thought they've all been blown away and I'm left on my own. And then suddenly this smell of burning flesh and smoke brought me back to reality. Now, this pins and needle sensation flowing through my body, and in particular, my legs. And as I looked down, I saw my left leg was completely gone. It was just a bit of bone sticking out with some meat hanging off of it. And straight away, the devastation. It's me. You know, I'm the one that stepped on those freaking IEDs. You know, there goes my career, my future, everything's gone. Life as I know it. I said, oh, okay, calm down. Let's see what else I've got missing. I remember bringing my hands in front of my face. Much to my relief, I still had them, but they're all pretty mangled, like been put through a blender. I had an open fracture and other open wounds, blood coming out everywhere. I unpicked my helmet and my glasses, removed them. You know, my glasses saved my eyesight. And then I just felt this liquid just gushing up, just filling the crater that I was lying in. And that was my own blood. And then suddenly this intense, raging pain just tore through my body. It's something I've never felt anything like it before, and something I wish I'd never feel ever again, and I can't really describe it, but it's the most horrendous thing I've ever felt. And then I could just feel my life kind of draining into the ground beneath me, and all I wanted to do was just sort of close my eyes and just go. I thought, hang on a minute, I can't do that, because I can't die here, not like this. You know, I've got people at home I need to get back for, and I just remember praying, it's like, God, please, just give me some strength, I need to stay awake. And actually I answered my prayer because I managed to somehow keep my eyes open and just remain conscious, and the guys did really well in getting me off the ground, and we got to the base, and the helicopter then turned up. It was about 34 minutes after incident now, and I remember as it landed the heat from the engines washing over me and all this dust being kicked up, and the guys got me on there, and by now the whole world just started turning black. Like this fight to stay awake just is one I wasn't winning, and I had this real sense of, you know, this is it. I don't know how, somehow I managed to, above all that noise, get the medic's attention to tell her what's going on, and she said, don't worry, we've got you. And she shouted actually, it was pretty loud. But just like that, I was gone. Next time I opened my eyes, I saw my wife at the time standing there, just saying something to me. And basically she's taken the mick because when I opened my eyes for the first time, they were both facing completely opposite directions. You know, and that was, you know, a good bit of banter goes a long way, as we heard earlier on. And I was quite relieved because I was like, yes, you know, I'm in the right place, I'm going to make it. But I noticed I had this horrible tube go down my throat, and I had this machine to the left of me making this breathing noise. It was keeping me alive. When I got blown up, I contracted severe pneumonia and swine flu, and the doctors had basically given me everything that they could, and they basically didn't know if I was going to make it. I couldn't sit up, I couldn't even lift my arms, I couldn't roll over, I couldn't do anything. It wasn't even 24 hours prior that I was second in command of a group of 12 soldiers, and now I can't even control my own breathing. How am I going to be a man? How am I going to be a husband, exist? And I sort of came to this junction where I had a choice to make. You know, one, I can kind of wallow in self-pity and just make a bad situation feel a lot worse, or I could at least try and do what I can to make it better. And that's what I chose to do, and now I'm filling myself with this confidence. And the more confidence I started feeling, the more frustrated I started feeling, motivated, sorry, not confident. Anyway, because I just wanted to get out of hospital. I mean, unless you get paid a lot of money, I didn't see anybody enjoying being there. But, you know, ultimately, some challenges just take as long as they take. So this is where patience came in. There's no cuffing it, there's no bluffing it, there's no shortcutting it, it's just literally have to roll with it. And now I'm kind of lying there, bored out of my mind with only my own thoughts to keep me active. And, you know, I needed a goal. I needed something to drive me forward. And the thought of leaving hospital was just that bit too far. So with the help of the doctors, we managed to kind of break this down into the things I needed to achieve in order to be able to go to the recovery centre. And then over the next few weeks, just through sort of sheer hard work, determination, and just changing the approach whenever things didn't work out, I managed to get these things done. The first thing was just really waiting for my lungs to clear up so I could get out of intensive care, go to the normal ward. And then it was a case of learning or having the ability to sit up again, regaining the ability to feed myself, getting into a wheelchair, and then last and certainly the most tricky was going to the toilet on my own. And I remember wheeling up to this toilet, and my hands were pretty mangled still at the time, were pretty broken, so I couldn't use them, and there's a gap between the wheelchair and the toilet, and this big fight just ensued. I had both the disabled bars down, and people outside must have been thinking, what the hell's this bloke doing? But anyway, I managed to hook my elbows in different places and somehow just hoisted myself across. You know, and I was on there, I was facing backwards, but you know, I was on target. I was thinking, yes, you know, how amazing is that? You know, I've done everything that I needed to do to be able to get out of here. And it didn't really stop there, because my occupational therapist came down, and she, basically, you can see in the picture there, they asked if I wanted to do some standing or taking a few steps, and I was bewildered by this because I wasn't sure how it would work, but they basically placed me on this like bed that can lift up vertically. While I was lying on there, they strapped these makeshift legs onto me. The one on the left is like a peg leg with a strap that went over my shoulder. The one on the right is like a cage that had like an inflatable cushion to hold it in place. And then basically, once this was strapped up, this bed just started lifting. And I was standing again. I was like, no way, this is absolutely insane. It's like 3.5 weeks ago, I was blown up, I was practically dead, and I'm standing again. I was like, okay, concentrate, I've just got to take that first step. And I remember just dragging my right leg across and then onto the next. And before I knew it, I was halfway across the room. You know, what an amazing way to finish my time at hospital, to set me up very nicely for what comes next, which is to go to the Defence Rehabilitation Centre in Port. That was down in Surrey. It was a state-of-the-art facility, and basically I was assigned to a team of professionals. I had occupational therapists, physiotherapists, remedial instructors, a prosthetist, a consultant, you know, nurses, doctors, everybody on site. And I'd work with this team day in, day out until I physically couldn't improve anymore. And then that's when I was ready to leave the military. And it was about a 4-year-long process for me, and I would be there for 4 weeks, and then go home for 3 weeks. So physically things were going really well, and my recovery was kind of going according to plan, if not slightly ahead of plan. But it was the times that I went home that the reality truly started hitting me hard, especially the first time I went home, because the time before, life looked completely different. Before then, well, everything changed. Home environment, dynamics within my relationship, how people treated me, everything was different. And it's just kind of this expectation that because I was doing so well, that I needed to keep doing well. I couldn't really tell people that I was starting to struggle. I didn't want to disappoint them. But also, I was one of those that, I didn't want to make my problems other people's problems. I don't want to talk about it. I can deal with it on my own. That kind of stuff. And, as time went on, started a business in the property industry, and then started a family. And by now, things really started to come apart because the pressure of fatherhood. How am I going to be a dad? I'm not going to be able to do the things that other dads can do, so my kids may grow up resenting me and basically missing out on a lot of stuff. And it almost became a bit too much, and I started becoming extremely depressed, just miserable, feeling guilty, all of that kind of stuff. And the only way I kind of tried to fix it was to buy more things, do more things. I started another business, chasing money, thinking that might help. And all of this stuff just made it worse. And I got to a point where I was in that danger zone because I wasn't really doing anything positive to fix it. And this is where I spiraled. And I got to the conclusion that actually the best thing to do for me is just to take myself off this planet. I'm just ruining everything else. I can't seem to make it any better. And once again, I was at a junction with two choices to make. I could do something like that, but where's it going to leave my family? But the dangerous thing actually is that when I became convinced that even my children would be better off without me, that was a very, very dark place to be. But I just had this voice in me that's just saying, look, you've not tried everything. You've not tried everything. And that's the moment where I finally admitted I needed help. I don't have all the knowledge required to fix this. And actually admitting that I needed help was just lifted a weight off my shoulders, because I now finally can see and take responsibility. Because really, people can talk to me all they want about getting help, but until I actually do that for myself, nothing's going to change. And I reached out and got the help I needed, and various different therapies and so on, and now I started to learn to accept the situation. I could accept what's happened and how it's left me. I could start to actually looking forward in life rather than focusing on what was in the past. And now I'm looking forward with anticipation. I was actually able to take on a few more things, do something different. And now I'm kind of moving into that stage of understanding where I've sort of become a student of a new environment. What works? What can I do? What can't I do? How can I thrive? Make the most of what I have. And this is where I knew where I was mentally and physically, but where did I want to end up? How am I going to get there? What strategy I'm going to use? Who am I going to use to help me get there? And in this stage, it's just brilliant, just doing all sorts of things, and just working with people, and just really started to kind of build that confidence. And the more confident I started feeling, the more I was able to do. Until I got to that point of having that satisfaction in life again. But the thing is staying there, whereas moving forward with life, that's the hard bit. We all know challenges don't stop coming. There's all sorts of things that happen. I still had that one business that was plaguing me, so I had to get rid of that. That was a massive relief because it was not done for the right reasons. Now I could actually apply my time to what's really important, including my children and so on. But that still has challenges too. My disability still had challenges. And also I wasn't really able to save my marriage, so that brought on challenges. But one thing that really did show me was that the tools that I learned and the support that I had really did help. And that also then helped me through all of these next bits. But the thing that was also required was a thing called a coping mechanism. I'm sure most people in this room, if not everybody, have heard of coping mechanisms. And I have to admit that I was rubbish at using them. I'd never used them. I'd never felt the need to. But actually they came in really handy. So for me, it was just something that can help me when I'm on the edge about to fall over it, just to pull me back. So I can just gain that clarity again, so I can then go and get the help that I needed. But the thing I realised with coping mechanisms, so for me it's all sorts of things like exercise, music, faith, journaling, whatever. It's different for different people. But they only buy time. They never fix the underlying issues. It was still really important for me to go out and get help to deal with what's actually going on. Just to avoid any more snakes rearing their heads in the future. And it's also worth having more than one. Because when I'm out with the kids in town, banging out and doing press-ups in the town is not the best way to deal with the situation. So it's probably good to have like a backup, maybe a breathing technique or something that can just help me regain that control. And using these things, I managed to do things I never thought of. I mean, there's a few photos there. You can see my kids in prison, which is where I am most of the time. So in that one photo, working with Ukrainians as well, going through a similar thing, doors just opened up. And with each of these events, it's having to use the same tools to get through them. Last year, for example, I cycled with a couple of other injured guys bound from Canada to the Mexican border to become world first. Stuff like that. Again, using the same tools. So these are really valuable. And it just all begins with admitting I needed help and getting that support. Then it's getting some kind of strategy. Where am I now? Where do I want to be? How am I going to get there? And in coping mechanisms to just help when things get a bit too much. Resilience. What does resilience look like to me? So to me, resilience is not just having the ability to endure. To me, it's actually a bit deeper than that. Because for me, it really meant like digging in to, for example, doing the right thing when nobody was looking, admitting when I made a mistake, and actually owning up to that, no matter how embarrassing that is. Doing the right thing, not just for myself, but for those around me as well. And that often was the hardest thing to do, which to me required the most resilience. But the thing is, the more I was doing these things, the better I became at doing it. I can't change what's happened to me, or forever be a part of who I am. But with the right tools, support, and making the right choices, I can certainly change what happens next.